I never thought I would be sharing this story, but perhaps writing it down will help me process everything that happened. 3 years ago, my life in suburban Chicago was what most would consider ideal. I had been married to Rebecca for 8 years. We had a beautiful home in the northwest suburbs, and our careers were thriving. I worked as a financial analyst while Rebecca had built a successful career in marketing. From the outside, we were the perfect couple. Rebecca and I met in college and had been inseparable since our junior year. After graduation, we moved in together, and 2 years later, we were married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family. Her sister, Vanessa, was the maid of honor. Vanessa was 3 years younger than Rebecca, and they had always been close despite their different personalities. Where Rebecca was organized and methodical, Vanessa was spontaneous and free-spirited. After our wedding, Vanessa moved to California to pursue her dreams of becoming an actress. We would see her once or twice a year during holidays, and she would occasionally crash at our place when visiting Chicago for auditions or family events. I always enjoyed her company. She brought a liveliness to our home that was refreshing. In early 2020, everything changed. The pandemic hit and Vanessa lost her waitressing job in Los Angeles that had been supporting her between acting gigs. With rent prices skyrocketing and no steady income, she called Rebecca in tears, not knowing what to do. Without hesitation, Rebecca offered her our guest room until she could get back on her feet. I agreed, thinking it would be temporary perhaps. A month or two at most. 2 months turned into 6, and by the end of 2020, Vanessa had become a permanent fixture in our home. Initially, I welcomed the company, especially when Rebecca's marketing firm required her to travel for client meetings as business picked up again. Working from home could be isolating, and having Vanessa around made the house feel less empty. At first, everything was fine. Vanessa was respectful of our space and often cooked dinner as a way to contribute to the household. She was actively applying for jobs and would spend hours in the guest room practicing monologues for virtual auditions. Rebecca and I were happy to help her during this difficult transition. Things began to change subtly in the spring of 2021. Rebecca's work travel increased to nearly 2 weeks each month as our company landed several major accounts. Vanessa and I found ourselves spending more time together, watching movies in the evening or taking walks around the neighborhood after work hours. One night, while Rebecca was on a business trip to New York, Vanessa suggested we cook dinner together instead of ordering takeout. I agreed, thinking it would be nice to prepare a proper meal for once. We decided on making homemade pasta, something Rebecca and I had learned in a cooking class, but rarely had time to do any more. As we stood in the kitchen, flour covering the countertops and our hands coated in sticky dough, Vanessa looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. "You know," she said quietly, "Rebecca doesn't realize how lucky she is to have someone who's willing to try new things like this." I laughed it off, attributing her comment to the glass of wine she'd been sipping while we cooked. But as we continued working side by side, I noticed how she would brush against me more frequently than necessary, how her gaze would linger when I wasn't looking directly at her. By the time we sat down to eat, the atmosphere had shifted. The conversation flowed easily, but underneath ran a current of tension I couldn't quite identify. After dinner, as I was washing dishes, Vanessa came up behind me. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," she whispered, standing close enough that I could feel her breath on my neck. "Something I've been thinking about for a while now." My heart pounded as I turned around, unsure of what was happening. Before she could continue, my phone rang. It was Rebecca calling to check in. The moment dissolved as I answered, walking quickly into the living room and away from whatever had been building in the kitchen. The next morning, I convinced myself I had misinterpreted things. Vanessa acted normally at breakfast, talking about an audition she had scheduled for later that week. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction of back-to-back Zoom meetings. 3 days later, Rebecca called to say her trip was being extended by another week. Her team needed to resolve some unexpected issues with the client, and as the project lead, she had to stay. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice and assured her everything was fine at home. That evening, Vanessa suggested we make dinner together. Again, Against my better judgment, I agreed. As we moved around the kitchen preparing the meal, she was more direct this time. "I've always admired your relationship with Rebecca," she said while chopping vegetables. "But lately, I've been wondering if you're truly happy." I tensed, focusing intently on the sauce I was stirring. "Of course I'm happy. Why would you ask that?" Vanessa set down her knife and turned to face me. "Because I see how lonely you are when she's gone. And she's gone a lot, James." Before I could respond, she continued, her voice dropping lower. "There's something I want to ask you. Something I'd never have the courage to say if I wasn't worried about you." My hand froze on the wooden spoon as she stepped closer. "I want you to kiss me," she said, her eyes locked with mine. "Just once, to see if what I'm feeling, what I think you might be feeling too, is real." I stepped back, shocked by her directness. "Vanessa, I don't know what you think is happening here, but I love Rebecca. I would never what? Never think about someone else? Never wonder what it would be like to be with someone who's actually present in your life." Her words cut deep, touching on insecurities I hadn't fully acknowledged even to myself. "This isn't right," I said firmly, turning off the stove. "You're Rebecca's sister, my sister-in-law. This conversation shouldn't be happening." Vanessa's expression hardened. "So you've never thought about it? Not even once? Because the way you look at me sometimes tells a different story." I shook my head, refusing to engage further. "I think we should finish dinner separately tonight." As I turned to leave the kitchen, she caught my arm. "James, wait. I'm sorry. Please don't tell Rebecca about this. It would destroy us both." I nodded stiffly and retreated to my home office, dinner forgotten. That night, I barely slept, replaying the conversation and wrestling with uncomfortable truths. Had I unintentionally encouraged her? Had I been sending signals I wasn't aware of? And most disturbing of all, why hadn't I immediately shut down? Her suggestion without a moment's hesitation? The week that followed was excruciating. Vanessa and I avoided each other as much as possible in the confines of our shared home. When we did interact, it was with painful politeness, our previous. Easy companionship shattered. I threw myself into work, scheduling meetings during times I would normally take breaks, anything to minimize our contact. When Rebecca finally returned home, I was overwhelmed with both relief and guilt. As she hugged me in our entry, Vanessa watched from the staircase, her expression unreadable. That night, as Rebecca unpacked and chatted animatedly about her trip, I felt a crushing weight on my chest. Nothing had happened between Vanessa and me, but the mere fact that the conversation had occurred felt like a betrayal. For the next 2 weeks, things appeared to return to normal. Rebecca was home, and Vanessa announced she had landed a part in a local theater production, which kept her out of the house during evenings and weekends. I began to think the awkward incident would fade away, becoming nothing more than an uncomfortable memory dot. Then came the day that changed everything. I was working from home as usual when I received a text from Rebecca asking me to check a file on her laptop for an important client presentation. She had forgotten to email it to herself before leaving for the office. The file was easy to find, and I sent it over immediately. As I was closing the laptop, a notification appeared in email from a hotel chain confirming a reservation for the coming weekend. Thinking it was related to her work travel, I almost ignored it. But something caught my eye. The reservation was for a hotel just 30 minutes from our house. Confused, I opened the email and felt my world collapse around me. The reservation was for Rebecca and someone named Michael, with a special request noted for champagne and strawberries upon arrival, an anniversary package. My hands shaking, I took a deep breath and tried to think rationally. There could be an explanation. Perhaps it was for a friend, a surprise for someone else, a work event I wasn't aware of. But deep down, I knew for the first time in our relationship, I did something I never thought I would do. I searched through her emails. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Messages going back nearly a year between Rebecca and this Michael person, filled with intimate details, plans for their meets, and discussions about their future together. As I sat there staring at the Screaming in disbelief, Vanessa entered the room. She took one look at my face and knew something was terribly wrong. James? What happened? Without speaking, I turned the laptop toward her. She read through the emails, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. Oh my God, she whispered, sitting down heavily beside me. I had no idea. We sat in silence for several minutes, the reality of the situation sinking in. Then Vanessa spoke again, her voice barely audible. I knew something was off with her. The constant trips, the late-night phone calls she'd take in another room. I just never wanted to believe she could do this to you. I looked at her, suddenly suspicious. Did you know about this? Is that why you said those things to me in the kitchen? Vanessa's eyes widened. No, James, I swear I didn't know. What I said to you ... That was just me being selfish and confused about my own feelings. I never imagined Rebecca was actually... She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. That evening, when Rebecca came home, I was waiting in the living room, her laptop open on the coffee table. Vanessa had offered to leave, to give us privacy for the inevitable confrontation, but I asked her to stay. I needed a witness, someone who would prevent me from either minimizing what had happened or reacting too harshly. When Rebecca saw us sitting there, her expression shifted from confusion to fear as her eyes fell on the open laptop. She knew immediately. James, I can explain, she began, but I cut her off. A year, Rebecca. You've been seeing this person for a year. Well, I was here waiting for you to return from business trips that were actually romantic getaways. Her face crumpled. It wasn't supposed to happen. Michael was just a client at first, and then ... things changed. I tried to end it so many times, but what? You couldn't help yourself? You couldn't respect our marriage enough to be honest with me? My voice was steady despite the storm raging inside me. Rebecca's eyes darted to Vanessa. Why is she here? This is between us. She's here because she's family, I said. And unlike you, she's been honest with me. Rebecca's expression hardened. Honest? You think she's being honest? Did she tell you how she's felt about you for years? How she's always been jealous of what we had? I glanced at Vanessa, whose face had gone pale. This isn't about Vanessa. I said firmly, this is about you and me and the fact that you've been living a double life for the past year. What followed was hours of painful conversation, tears, and accusations. Rebecca alternated between remorse and defensiveness, revealing that her relationship with Michael had begun during a particularly difficult period in our marriage, a time when I had been consumed with a challenging project at work and had, in her words, emotionally checked out. While that may have been true, nothing justified the elaborate deception that followed. As the night wore on and emotions ran high, Rebecca made a startling confession that left both Vanessa and me speechless. You want to know why I really asked Vanessa to stay with us? Rebecca said, her voice cold. It wasn't just because she needed help. It was because I thought having her here would distract you, keep you from noticing my absences. I knew how she felt about you. I thought giving her this opportunity to be around you would keep both of you occupied. Well, I figured out what I wanted, Vanessa gasped. You knew you deliberately put me in this position? Rebecca laughed bitterly. Of course I knew. You've been transparent since college, the way you look at him. I just never thought you'd actually act on it. I felt sick, realizing I had been a pawn in a game I didn't even know was being played. So you used your own sister as a distraction? While you carried on with your affair? I didn't think anything would actually happen between you two, Rebecca said defensively. I just thought having her around would keep you company, keep you from asking too many questions about my trips. Vanessa stood up, trembling with anger and hurt. I can't believe you would do this. To both of us. Using my feelings like this, manipulating us for your convenience. The revelation changed everything. What had seemed like a straightforward case of infidelity had transformed into something far more complex and disturbing. Rebecca had orchestrated a situation designed to facilitate her affair, using her own sister's emotions as a tool in her. deception. By morning, the path forward was painfully clear. My marriage to Rebecca was over not just because of her affair, but because of the calculated way she had manipulated the people closest to her. Trust, once broken in such a fundamental way, could never be fully restored. Rebecca moved out, the following day taking only what she needed immediately and promising to arrange for the rest later. As for Vanessa, she was as much a victim in Rebecca's scheme as I was, but the awkwardness of our situation made it impossible for her to remain in the house. She found a temporary place to stay with a friend from her theater group, promising to look for a more permanent arrangement as soon as possible. In the days that followed, as I moved through our now empty house like a ghost, I reflected on the irony of the situation. Rebecca had been so concerned about me potentially developing feelings for Vanessa that she had created the very conditions that might have led to that outcome. Yet, despite the opportunity and even the brief moment of temptation in the kitchen, nothing had happened between us. The boundaries had held firm. A month after the confrontation, I received divorce papers from Rebecca's lawyer. Along with them was a handwritten note. I know what I did was unforgivable. I justified it by telling myself you and Vanessa would eventually cross a line, giving me the moral high ground. When that didn't happen, I realized I was the only villain. In this story, I'm sorry for betraying you both. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me, even though I don't deserve it. 6 months passed. The divorce was finalized, and I was slowly rebuilding my life. I had minimal contact with Rebecca and had not seen Vanessa since she moved out, though we occasionally exchanged brief texts. Then, on a rainy October evening, there was a knock at my door. It was Vanessa, soaked from the downpour, her eyes red from crying. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. "There is something you need to know." I hesitated but stepped aside to let her enter. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had made her request months ago, the request that had inadvertently exposed Rebecca's affair. "I've been struggling with whether to tell you this," Vanessa began, her hands wrapped around the mug of coffee I'd prepared. "But you deserve the truth, the whole truth." She took a deep breath before continuing. "That night in the kitchen, when I asked you to kiss me, it wasn't really about my feelings for you." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "I knew about Rebecca's affair," she confessed, unable to meet my eyes. "I had known for almost 2 months before that night. I accidentally saw texts on her phone when she asked me to look up a number for her. My mind raced, trying to process this new information. So why didn't you tell me?" At first, I confronted her. She broke down and promised she would end it. She said it was just a mistake, that she loved you and didn't want to lose you. I gave her 2 weeks to tell you herself. Vanessa paused, visibly struggling with her next words. When she didn't, I decided I had to do something. But I couldn't just tell you, you might not have believed me. Or worse, you might have forgiven her too easily without knowing the full extent of her deception. So the kitchen, that was a test? I asked, the pieces finally clicking into place. She nodded. I had to know what kind of man you really were. If you had taken me up on my offer even for a moment, I would have told you about Rebecca, but also known that maybe you two deserved each other. But you didn't. You were loyal even when presented with temptation, even when you had been lonely. For months, I sat back, stunned by this revelation. "So you never actually double quotes, had feelings for you?" Vanessa finished. "As more than a brother-in-law and friend?" "No, Rebecca wasn't entirely wrong. I have always admired you and your relationship. But what she interpreted as romantic interest was actually just respect and affection." The rain continued to pound against the windows as we sat in silence, absorbing the implications of this final piece of the puzzle. "Why tell me now?" I finally asked. Vanessa looked up, her eyes clear and direct. "Because I'm moving back to California next week. For real this time, not running away. And I couldn't leave without you knowing the truth. You deserve that much. After everything you've been through." As Vanessa prepared to leave that night, I walked her to the door. my mind still processing everything she had shared. "For what it's worth," I said, "I appreciate what you tried to do, even if your methods, WERE unconventional." She smiled sadly. "I'm not proud of how I handled it. I should have just told you what I knew." Playing games, even with good intentions, only caused more pain in the end. I nodded, understanding the complex tangle of loyalty and betrayal she had navigated. "Take care of yourself in California." "You too, James. And remember what happened. Here doesn't define you. You were the only one who acted with integrity throughout this whole mess." After she left, I stood in the doorway watching the rain, feeling a strange sense of closure. The betrayal still hurt, but knowing the complete truth somehow made it easier to bear. Rebecca had betrayed me in the most fundamental way, but I had remained true to myself and my values even when tested. 3 years have passed since that. Rainy night, I've rebuilt my life in ways I never expected. I sold the house, unable to live with the memories it contained, and moved downtown to a smaller place with a view of Lake Michigan. I changed jobs, started therapy, and eventually began dating again. Recently, I heard that Rebecca had moved to Seattle with Michael. Vanessa is doing well in California. She landed a recurring role on a television series and seems happy from what I can tell from her social media. As for me, I'm still healing, still learning to trust again. But I've come to realize that the most important truth in this whole story is the one I discovered about myself, even in the darkest moments. When temptation and revenge might have seemed justified, I remained the person I wanted to be. And in the end, that's the only truth that really matters. Sometimes, the most shocking revelations aren't about what others did to us, but about who we choose to be when faced with betrayal. And sometimes, the most surprising ending to a painful story is the discovery that you're stronger than you ever knew.